We'll just go ahead and start with how about you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you've gotten into music, and some of your biggest influences.
Yeah. So I started taking guitar lessons when I was 8, and I never really learned how to play it especially well because my guitar teacher started teaching me music theory, and that's sort of what our lessons turned into, like how chords were built versus how to play them. So I have this guitar back here, but I can't really play it all that well at all. But I stopped after 2 years, and sort of using that knowledge, I figured out how to play the piano that was sitting around my house. But it wasn't until high school that I started taking piano lessons because I wanted to learn more music theory. I'd been improvising at the piano and really enjoyed doing that and wanted to be able to do it better. So we found a teacher, but he said that I could only study with him if I was wanting to do music professionally. So I thought, well, it's freshman year of high school. I can always change my mind. So I decided to go all in, and that turned out to really be what I wanted to do. But he also required that, along with the theory we were learning, that I learn how to play the piano and practice 1, 2, or 3 hours a day as we went on. So that became something I was serious about and really enjoyed doing. And then I thought that I wanted to be a performance major, but starting in high school, I wasn't far along enough at all to study performance. But I'd been composing, so I applied to schools being a composition major, and I got into Michigan State, and the first year I felt really like I didn't belong. Everyone was writing music that I didn't understand, and the listening that we did in private lessons, I just didn't feel like I had a way in on that music. But I stuck with it. And sophomore year, I started taking with Dr. David Biedenbender, and that changed everything. I found music that I felt like I did understand, and sort of learned a way into music that I hadn't yet, and really enjoyed composing, and started being happy with the music that I was writing, and that sort of carried through till now. I'm not studying composition in school. I'm studying music theory, but I'm taking composition lessons, and that's just an important part of what I do as the theory part of it.
So I'm wondering, because you started with um, guitar and you were like, I really like theory. And I'm wondering how much like your compositional process focuses on theory first, or do you, um, I don't know how to ask that question more. Like, do you like map out things like from like an analysis standpoint first and then go from there, or do you kind of like intuitively write and then sometimes analyze it and see what's going on, or what is that like for you? How does theory work into your process?
Yeah, some of the time I decide that I like maybe want to use a certain collection of pitches or something, but a lot of the time I'll improvise on the piano, and that's my first step, and then I'll record that or I'll transcribe it, and then I'll keep writing based on that. So I it's really easy for me to overthink things while I'm writing because I want to sort of, as I'm coming up with ideas, think about like what how it's structured or what makes sense about it. And that's something that I'm working on limiting, because that winds up like making creativity just like freeze as soon as I start overthinking it. So I think maybe later on in the process that's part of it, but I'm working really hard not to make it early on. Yeah.
Now, I'm thinking about like the musical experiences you've had, and then maybe connecting that to your compositions. Are there any like really moving experiences you've had with music, times you've been at concerts or performed music or saw your music performed that continue to inspire your compositions, or just something you may want to talk about and mention to the audience?
Yeah, for sure. There are a few that come to mind. In high school, my band director lent me his like CD book that was this thick. So for one week, I just was putting CDs in and out of the CD player, and I wasn't concentrating on all of it. But the fourth movement of Mahler 2, I just happened to be walking back into the room, and I thought that was like the most beautiful thing. It's the one, with the it's a symphony, but it has the mezzo soprano. Um, so that was I guess I had sort of forgotten that sometimes music did that to me. So like going right into college, that was a cool little like burst of like maybe I could create music that does something like that. Maybe I could try and perform music in a way that impacts people the way that really hit me. Because that was sort of the first time that it happened to that degree for me. And then um, freshman year, near the end of the year, and this was the year where I was feeling like maybe I didn't belong as a composition major. Music 21, which is the new music ensemble at Michigan State, performed a concert that had Messiaen's Quartet for the End of Time and George Crumb's An Idyll for the Misbegotten. And both those pieces were like modernist 20th century pieces. But I felt like for both of them, I had a hook in, and I was just like riveted the whole time. And and it was so cool to find music that had been written in that time period that was by some of the same composers on that I'd listened to, but I felt like that I had some sort of experience with, and that made me want to continue in a way that I hadn't before. So I think that was a really powerful experience. Um, and then that summer I did a summer music program, the European American Musical Alliance, which was really cool for a lot of reasons. It was sort of like keyboard harmony, counterpoint boot camp for a month, but it was great to be in the city. But the all the composers and there were a few performers and conductors too were in this choir that we met up for once or twice a week, and I submitted a piece, and that was one of the ones that we would do in our concert at the end. And that was one of the first times that a piece that I'd wrote had been performed, and it got performed in this like beautiful old Paris conservatory by a group of composers, and yeah, that was just an experience I'll definitely always remember.
That's really cool. So, I mean, we all share the fact that we went to Michigan State. And thinking back to your time there, and I guess still currently, um, were there any things, maybe especially as an undergraduate, that you wished that the school had provided, like as a composer or just a musician, now that you're out of your undergraduate degree, some skills that you wish you had obtained earlier on in order to be sort of freelancing musician?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question. The I guess a lot of the some of the hard parts of being a composer are like working with performers and like knowing how to collaborate, how to workshop, how to ask about money, things like that. And I feel like Michigan State did a really good job of that in our studio classes. A lot of times we covered career type subjects, but that was definitely not stuff I knew coming in, I think it wasn't until junior year that I felt a little more secure on my footing with some of those ideas. Um, I I think that maybe schools could talk about money management a little bit more because I mean I private teach, I play piano at a church, I do accompanying when I have opportunities to. I'm a TA right now, and I have money coming in from, but I compose, from all kinds of different streams, and knowing how to manage that like on taxes, and just like knowing how to budget when you don't have like a single career is, I think, really challenging. And that's something that maybe can be approached, because I think a lot of music majors leave school and wind up in that exact situation where you have all these skills, but what exactly does a living look like? Um, and then I don't know. This is something I've been thinking about for a while since I've been private teaching. But I like just learning how to either run your own studio or like actually how to private teach, because we've been in lessons for so long, but I I don't know if we've always thought about um, what it's like to be on the other side, and what it's like to be on the other side, not for people who are like serious, like want to do it for our career musicians like us, but like 6 year olds. And a lot of us are, you know, are going to wind up doing that, whether it's like I'm really enjoying it, whether it's by choice or just an opportunity that comes up. And knowing how to help out these students is a really practical skill, and I think that it can be a really musical thing to learn as well.
I want to loop back and hit on something that I think we might all kind of feel a little bit of sympathy with. I mean, it's this kind of idea of being like an outsider in the like classical music kind of thing. Um, I mean, like all of us, I think, came up in band or something like that. But even the saxophonist in me is like, orchestra, what? Like classical rep, what? Just from the newness of the instrument. I wonder if you feel that way still now that you've got multiple um, facets of your musical career going, whether that's like teaching or performing or composing or playing at a church or any of those things. I wonder if you still feel kind of like an outsider, and if that kind of experience has worked its way back into your teaching whenever you're teaching younger students.
Yeah, no, totally. That's sorry. That's something that I think I struggle with, and is on my mind a lot of the time. It's so easy to focus on what we're less good at than what we are good at. And I know that in my piano playing, there are like people who are just much better than me. They've been doing it for much longer and devoted more time to it. And in composing, there are people who sort of got on their track or had some idea of what they were doing for longer, or are just more sure of themselves. And that's just not something that I can really relate to a ton. But I think that's part of it. I mean, I feel like you were talking about with yourself, Keaton. I appreciate your openness about that, and I feel like the people who I've gotten to know really well in the composition program, like just about every single person is like really unsure of themselves and what they do, and that's really reassuring because it would be horrible to be the only one who feels that way. Um, but I guess one thing about teaching, especially some of these younger students, is that it is a whole different set of skills. So I did feel a lot of that imposter syndrome when I started teaching, because I realized really early that I can't teach a 6 year old like they're a college kid, and there were ways that I was doing that I didn't realize. But I did a lot of research, and now it's really a lot of fun, and it's still like musical, but it's musical for like just trying to help them enjoy it and have a way to come back to it later in life if they choose to. If they want to, be a professional musician a little longer down the way, then that's great. But that's not really how I tend to approach it. So I think like it. I'm not meaning to say that it's like not a serious thing, but it's nice to have like a way of making music that is not like this is the thing that I do, and I have to like do really well 100% of the time at like with that level of seriousness, and just going to a lesson and say like let's try to have fun making music. So
I just think that's real important. I think your students are going to benefit from that a lot. And
yeah, I hope so.
it also just sounds kind of like a composer mentality. For some reason, I'm imagining this being a piano kind of lesson, but it's like a composer mentality in a piano setting. It's like everything is very subjective, and it's like, well, how can we have fun with you, person
For
A?
sure.
A.
Yeah, yeah, and I think being a composer is a really helpful background too, because I like ways that we've like that maybe we would improvise or like be creative like with each other if we were just sitting down. Like I can do those same things with like these my students, and with all my students I try to have like some way that they're musically creative in every lesson, and that could be like really simple, like having them just like make up a rhythm for me to repeat back, but it could be a lot more involved than that too. So I'm really glad to have that part of my training, because I think it helps a lot and helps keep them interested and feeling like music is a thing that's important to them and that they want to do.
So during this past year, we've all had to adapt in like many different ways, both as musicians ourselves and for our students. What are some ways that you've adapted for your students, like with education, and also to stay artistically motivated yourself?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, Zoom lessons are a whole different thing, but for like beginning students, it's not such a huge thing because as long as I can like see their hand, it's not like we're talking about like balance or tone, or like I really need to be able to hear super clearly. We're talking about like playing the notes, playing them musically, and like note reading. And so being on Zoom is actually kind of nice for some of that because I can share a screen and show like a picture of a keyboard, or um, show like my Finale, my notation software. And um and honestly, my in-person lessons are really hard because there's this big plastic divider in the middle of the room. So it's really hard to show them something or have them hear something. But if we're on a Zoom lesson, I have a document camera that I can put on my keyboard, and they can see really clearly what I'm doing. So there's a I mean, there's a benefit of each way, but I would say that in some ways it's an opportunity. Obviously, it's really challenging in others, but for MSU, I'm a TA, and one of the classes I teach is ear training, which I thought was just going to be like the worst thing to do over Zoom because it's all echoing. And remembering, because I was in the same class, because I'm at MSU. I went to MSU for my undergrad, and we did lots of like singing together, um, and obviously with the lag, you just can't do that over Zoom. So that was a lot of adapting, and luckily Dr. Callahan put a great deal of thought into that. We're all teaching the curriculum he put together, but I mean, not just his preparation, but like the fact that all these students are willing to try things out in this really weird, like sort of sterile seeming environment compared to being in a real classroom is really cool, because I think as a student I would be really I don't know, not uncomfortable, but maybe like close to it, something like that. But um sorry, what was the other part of that question? You asked how I do adapt my teaching and
And
something
how
else.
you stay artistically motivated through things like the pandemic or any
Yeah.
kind of slump.
Yeah, that's that's really hard too, because you're actually going to be my first premiere since this whole nightmare started, just because there are no in-person concerts, and not a lot of people are doing virtual things. At least there haven't been. I guess I could have created like my own opportunities, but apart from that, there's like there are fewer things just happening. So I'm really grateful for that. Um, yeah, but I've still been writing music, and I think working with people is the best way to do that. Just like having somebody in mind that you're writing for and working with them, sharing that excitement helps a lot. Um, but I've been I've not been doing such a good job of it this semester, but trying to give myself some space to decompress, because if I if I'm always doing something, then composing like really starts to feel like work, and I don't I don't want it to. at, After graduating with my bachelor's degree, I put together a recital, and a lot of it was premieres, and putting all of that together was really exhausting. I barely composed for 2 months after, and um, I don't know. I don't want to do that to myself again. I know that deadlines will come up and I'll have to push, but I don't know. I want it to be fun.
Yeah, I guess then that makes it less of a question of motivation, but rather just keeping one's artistic for lack of a better word, sanity, and how do we preserve the motivation for later and take this opportunity to get the rest that we may need after working through an undergrad, a bachelor's degree.
Yeah,
Um,
no, for sure.
yeah, but going from there, I guess we can start asking some not so serious questions, but still kind of serious because we're going to ask you about your preference on cats or dogs, and I think that's a pretty serious thing to consider.
Yeah. Well, that one's pretty easy. I'm allergic to cats, so but I've never had either.
Okay.
Growing up, we had two water frogs, which are frogs with gills. I think the idea was that I was supposed to be able to prove that I could take care of them as a second grader and like clean their tank and feed them. And I think after the first week, it was 100% my mom. So if we were ever going to get a dog, that pretty much shot that idea. But yeah, out of the two of those, definitely dogs.
Okay, both answers are ultimately right. It's all about the explanation.
Yeah. What about you all? Are you cat dog people?
It used to be dogs. I've grown to cats, though. I lived with two cats last year, and just recently got my own cat, and I really love them. Just generally, I don't like how dogs jump on you, and cats, like, you give them space, they'll give you space, but also, you can really love each other.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, we all have cats. We are a cat trio. I think mine is right there, asleep on the bed. Speaking of just other kind of favorites and other things, what are some of the other like media and things that you've consumed, or that you like to consume, whether that's like movies or TV shows or like YouTube videos or podcasts? Um, yeah.
Yeah, hmm. I I probably watch like more TV than I should to decompress, but I just sometimes I really like need my brain to just like turn like liquid for a little bit, so that can help. I just got well, I'm in the middle of watching Schitt's Creek right now, and my girlfriend and I just finished watching How I Met Your Mother, and I don't know, I like watching just kind of like you know bad or not bad, silly sitcoms. But I really like Netflix's miniseries when I feel like I have a little more attention span. But I did just read the first book that I've read in, I think it's been like 4 years. It was a thriller called The Girl on the Train. It was made into a movie a few years ago. I didn't know that, but it was really interesting. It was like the plot was constructed really well, and at the payoff at the end was not what I was expecting at all. But yeah, so that was fun. But I started another one right before the semester began and thought I'd read that throughout, and I haven't touched it since. So I don't know if yeah, are any of you more successful than me at actually reading?
Keaton.
I've just had a lot of time to read,
Nice.
and with all of the things that happened last summer, in terms of like protests and just general civil unrest and everyone being fed up with everything, even now, and I just had a lot of time, so I was just like, might as well learn about all of this stuff because what else am I doing? Um, but I don't read. I only read like nonfiction-y things. Like I don't read anything that has like a narrative unless it's history. But even that, I don't know. But it makes me wonder. Like, are there any things that you've picked up even from this last book, that like relates to composition or something like that? Like some kind of like either literary device or like a rhetorical thing or even something about narrative or plot maybe. Um, because that's something that I feel like I miss a lot whenever I'm reading. I'm like, oh, cool, historical fact. This happened, but like in my brain, that doesn't necessarily always translate to something musical or artistic, and I'm wondering if it does for you.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about making a connection there. Yeah, not with this book, but in I think 4 years ago I read a book of short stories called "Will You Please Be Quiet, Please" by Raymond Carver, and they're just like pithy little short stories, and I thought that they were like it was cool how they were just like these little snapshots into like a person's life or a person's world. And I don't know if it was connected to that or anything, but I wrote my first set of miniatures shortly after. So like maybe there just this idea of like a little picture or something without really developing it too much. So maybe there's a connection. I don't really know though. I do like reading like historical like articles or like listening to podcasts about things that happen because a lot of times I don't come up with a title before I write a piece, but if I do, it's usually because I like read something or heard something really interesting and thought that would be cool to like base a piece around or just like have in my mind as I'm writing one. So um yeah.
So, outside of music, what are some things that you like to do for fun or some hobbies you have?
Yeah, um I really like to watch football, so I'm a little bummed that free agent season or that football season's over, but it's free agent season right now. So my phone keeps blowing up with like X player got signed to whatever team. So that's been like a nice little move back into it. But that's it's just like nice to have on in the background too if I'm doing other stuff. But since quarantine, I've gotten and my girlfriend and I have gotten really into cooking and cooking together. So that's been fun to try out a lot of other things. And I think that our generation has like a huge advantage because past generations, like you buy a cookbook or like get a family recipe and you're like, oh, I hope this is good. But now like you can go online and be like, I want to make this thing, and there are 6 recipes, and you choose the one that has 5 stars. So like I feel really good about our success rate in like cooking good food. So it's been a lot of fun to do and a nice way to like do something and not look at the screen.
Speaking of cooking, what would you say is your favorite meal of the day, or maybe even like a snack time, or maybe you got like
Oh, probably dinner. I don't usually eat breakfast and lunch. I don't know. It's usually just leftovers. So I feel like dinner is usually the most exciting, at least here. But I do like having breakfast for dinner. But just not at breakfast because that makes me like nauseous. um, but yeah.
What are some of the favorite meals that you've cooked
Ooh,
in the last year?
we made a Guinness beef stew that was really good, and like we started out with bacon, and then I thought that we were gonna like drain the bacon, but the bacon fat it just becomes like part of the base, and then I think it got like a half cup of like Worcestershire sauce, and like it just had so much flavor. It was so good, and it just like simmered for 4 hours. And a few weeks ago we tried making banh mi's, which are sandwiches that I had when I was in Paris, because um, they're all over the place in Paris, but they're really Vietnamese, right? Sandwiches that are on baguettes, and I'm sure that I know for a fact that what we did wasn't completely traditional, but we pork pate wasn't something we maybe wanted to eat, so we instead like made some chicken and pickled some radishes and carrots and put like a whole bunch of cilantro, and it was so good, and it like took me right back to lunch at that summer program. So yeah, have you had bombies,
Oh God,
Keaton?
yes, I love banh mi. It's like one of my
Nice.
favorite foods.
Yeah.
Also,
So,
you
oh,
had me at bacon earlier. I'm hungry now.
yeah, I have some Guinness over here, and I think I know what I'm going to do with it now.
Nice.
Um, so, I mean, I guess it's a little tough with like the pandemic still going on, but what things do you have going on or coming up, in your musical life or personal life that you want to talk about?
um well, I'm right now working on 2 compositions. One of them is for my friend who teaches at the same studio that I'm at. And I'm writing him a piece for solo guitar, which I've never written for guitar before, so that's a fun challenge. then I'm trying to write a piece for solo piano and interactive electronics, which I took a class on using an interactive electronic software, and that's the only time I've written a piece for electronics in that way. So those are both new things I'm excited about. But um, no like performances or anything coming up, but I'm working on a few papers, and one of them I'm for that are just final projects for classes I'm in, but one of them is on a piece by George Crumb, who's the composer that was at the concert I was at freshman year that I just fell in love with a different piece by him. But it's cool to sort of come full circle and be able to look at that piece from like with music theory eyes um, and and look at it in that way and be able to write about it. And cool that I'm able to write a paper about whatever composer I want to and not have to, fit into some kind of box here. So I'm enjoying digging into that piece and getting started with that.
I'm still muted. That's really fantastic. Well, we really appreciate the time you've taken to talk with us, the time you've taken to write the piece for us, and we can't wait to record and premiere it. Um, Thank you so much for all your work. We hope that, I mean, we learned a lot from you, but we hope that the audience gets to learn a little bit about you too, so they can relate to the piece. Thanks so much. We really appreciate it, Ryan.
Yeah, and thank you all so much for the opportunity and for being such great collaborators. This has been a really fun process. Can't wait to hear how the piece turns out.